Today you're going to be drawing a pair of eyes. You're going to need a piece of white drawing paper from your manila folder, your ruler, your pencil, and a blending stub. A regular number 2 pencil would be fine. You're going to need an eraser too. Or you could draw with your 2B, that would also, or HB, either one would be fine. So we have our paper horizontally. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to fold it in half horizontally, which means you'll be creating a long piece of paper or surface to work with. And we're going to be putting some guidelines on here. So I just need you to follow along and put the guidelines. I'm going to turn this so it's toward me, but what we're going to do is we're going to line up our ruler with the top, and we're going to pull a light guideline here. So I'm not giving it much pressure. Eventually I'll be getting rid of this, but I'm going to pull a line there. I'm going to come down and I'm going to put a line right next to it. So just one ruler width apart is our line down the middle. And then I'm going to put a line at the bottom. And I'm going to line this up with the edge of the paper on the bottom. And put a line there as well. Now, at the middle line, I'm going to line up my ruler between the 0 and the 12. Okay. And then I'm going to be putting marks, and I'll tell you what they are in just a minute. So I'm putting it on that second line, laying it back so it's lined up, and then I'm going to put a mark at 1.5 inches. So 1.5 is this longer line between the 1 and the 2. I'm going to put a mark here. I'm going to put a mark at 4.5, so between the 4 and the 5, the long line in the middle there. I'm going to put a mark at 7.5. That's the long line between the 7 and the 8. And then I'm going to put a long line at 10.5. Now, if you want to use your own eyes as a reference for drawing this, at this point you would either want to take a picture of your eyes on your phone, or you might want to get a mirror and use that as your reference. And you don't have to draw your eyes. You can draw along with me. I'll be talking through like the different parts of the eye. But what we're going to do is we're going to erase the line that goes in between. And what happens is we've made 3 sort of measurements here. 3 inches here, 3 inches in the middle, and 3 inches here. And we know that the proportion of the face is you have essentially 1 eye width in between your 2 eyes. So this is going to be the inner part of both of our eyes. This is the gap where our nose would be through this middle. Okay. So we're going to start here, and if you're looking in your mirror, looking at your camera, you're going to look at the top edge of your eye. Now for me, my eye pulls up in the middle, and I have it's not a totally even arch. As it arches this way, it actually is like taller here, and then pulls down into this corner. So I have like a longer, straighter sort of slope here, and then it pulls down in the middle. And I'm going to try to do the same thing on the side here. And what I'm doing is right now is I'm pulling a line like sort of across where this is, and that will give me like the height that I want to go to here. So anytime I'm doing something on this side, I'm trying to do a mirror image on the other. And it's pretty hard, but we'll just do the best that we can. It's not going to be perfect. If we wanted it to be perfect, we could fold this and trace it, but I don't really want us to do that. I want you to just sort of try your best to make it a match set, and we're not going to worry if it's a little bit off. So when I'm looking at this, I'm just loose with my lines, going nice and light, but I sort of draw a line across so I know how tall I want it to be. This will help me align some things. So the first is to look at the arc that's on the top side of your eye, and then I'm going to here. This is where, in the middle of your eye, you have a tear duct. The tear duct's going to fall below this guideline, and mine goes down and then picks up a little bit, And then when I look at the like from here out to the corner of my eye, mine does this. I have a longer like angle out, and then it picks up in the corner. And you can look what yours does, or you can just draw along with me. And also on this side, here's my tear duct. It falls below. Then I have a longer, straighter. I'm going to pull this down a little bit. A longer, straighter out. And then it picks up at the back edge. And I'm just sort of like looking at this shape here and this shape here, and then trying to get as close as I can. And again, it's not going to be a perfect thing, but I'm going to just do it as close as I can. All right, now, the next part of your eye is the colored part of your eye, and that's your iris. Your iris is a perfect circle, and on the top, your iris is hidden below your top lid. So the next thing I'm going to put on here, and we're going to look, you have white part of your eye called your sclera on the inside here, and on the outside edge, you'll have your iris. And for me, my iris almost rests on the bottom line here. So I'm going to be drawing my iris, and I'm going to try and draw, and what I'm actually going to draw is I'm going to draw the entire circle of my iris, and mine sits below my lid. So I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to draw that circle on both sides. Now, so that would be the color part of your eye, the brown or the blue or the green or the hazel. The next thing I want to do is I want to put the pupil. The pupil is the black center of your eye, and it sits directly in the middle of your iris. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to just look at my circle, and I'm going to divide it in half. So all I'm looking at right now is the circle. And then I'm going to divide it in half again this way, top and bottom. Do the same over here. So I'm going to go vertically dividing my circle in half, then dividing it in half this way. And that point right there is where the center of your pupil is going to go. Now, your pupil size is dictated by how large it is determined by how much light there is. So your pupil is what enlarges or gets smaller, I don't know if that's a word, gets larger or gets smaller based on the amount of light or stimulus that you have to your eye. So, and it sits right on that crosshair. That will be the center of it, the circle for your pupil as well. Okay? Now, your pupil is generally black, and so if your eye needs more light to see, your pupil opens, and if it's bright and sunny out, your pupil will be really small to keep the light from damaging your eye. The other thing is that your pupil, also, if you are on some type of substance like a drug or alcohol, your pupils often dilate and get really large. So that's another reason people's pupils might be larger or smaller. So what we're going to do now is we're also going to do this. We're going to get rid of this. That tells us like we don't need that guide above. We just needed that circle so we didn't crop off our eye and make like a half circle, like sometimes happens. So let's say here, this is another example. This is what sometimes happens when people draw their eyes. They draw this, which is like not, like for this, your iris would be this big. It just can't be that large. So when we're drawing this, we always draw that complete circle for our iris, making sure we're leaving enough sclera, the white of your eye inside and out. Okay. All right. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to make sure I have like a highlight on here, and my highlight is going to be smaller in the middle and larger as it goes out, which sort of, and sometimes I'll make it even like rounded. Okay, and I'm going to put it in the same place on this eye as far as like the light source is coming in from this right hand side. So here I'm going to put it here, and that is something I'm going to leave completely white when I draw this. And now I'm going to fill the pupil to black. So I'm going to take my pencil, I'm going to leave that one area I left white, and I'm going to fill both of these areas to black. Okay, now your iris is something like this, and there's lots of ways you're going to want to look at your iris, but out here on this outer edge is going to be darker, and it's going to have like this edge is usually a little bit sort of like frayed, so it's smooth on the outer edge of this circle, and it's always a little bit darker on the outer edge. Whether you have brown eyes, blue eyes, green eyes, it's always going to be darker on that outer rim. You're going to have these like smaller, sort of like jagged edge coming in, because this is a striated sort of muscle system. We're going to do that to both, just on the circle part at the top where it's cropped, we're not. Okay, and then we're going to pull lightly this sort of very light lines going from the middle of our pupil, like it's radiating out. That's why I didn't bother to erase these. So we're going to go out from the middle. This is lighter. Now, what I also want you to look at is some of you, I don't have this, but some of you, if you're looking at your eye, you may have this like almost like this burst that occurs around this inner part of your pupil. Sometimes it's a different color. If you have brown eyes, you might have a burst of gold right around your pupil. If you have green eyes, you might have a burst of brown or gold. If you have blue eyes, it might be a different color of blue, and you're going to put this burst there. I'm then going to get rid of the guideline that's here and here. I'm going to get rid of the guideline through this part of our eye here too. Now, next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our tear duct in. So you'll have a line that sits here, and then it's going to be a little bit darker in those corners. Same thing here. So it's like a line here, and then it creates a tear duct there. And the next thing is we're going to put our lid line. So for a good portion of people, the lid line is this crease that sits above your eye. Sometimes, depending on your nationality, you'll only see a lid line here, and you'll have, it's called like a hooded eye, where the lid pulls down over and you won't see the crease because it's sitting right behind here. Sometimes you'll see it. So I'm going to draw what I see on mine. I see it's tighter on the inside and then wider as it comes to the outer part of my eye. But this is going to be something that is truly individual. So you may want to look at your eyes, see what you actually have, or you're welcome to just draw what I'm drawing for mine. So on this side, it's tighter in the middle. Okay. And then it is going to be wider as it comes to the outer part of my lid. And really that is sort of determined by how your eyes sit on your skull. Because you have behind your eyes, you have a hole going into your skull, if you didn't know that. And it sort of is determined like how your eyes sit on there, or how the hole sits there. So here's an example. I have a small skull here. So what we're looking at is the sockets that are here. this is where your brow sits at this top edge, and this is where your eyeball sits. And depending on how protruding this is, depends on, like, determines sometimes how deep set your eyes sit into the socket, or if they're sitting fairly flush with the socket. And that's, again, nationality, really. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to lightly draw on the waterline. So the waterline is this. On the bottom part of your lid, and you can see this if you look in the mirror, you have this edge that you can see where your lashes sit below off of here. We're going to talk about lashes in a minute. So the waterline sits down here, and it's this sort of exposed part of your lid, and your lashes sit below that. You actually have one on the top side, but because of how, like, the view that we're getting of our eye, typically when we're looking straight on, we don't see it because it's sitting sort of turned downward. On the bottom side, you absolutely can see it. Okay? So let's also then start to put on our lashes. So lashes, I'm going to start, like, the part of our eye that protrudes the most is going to be somewhere right in here. And what I'm going to do is this. I'm not really making a V, but I'm like so I'm sort of toward the middle part of my eye. So if I like look at my eye in sum total, the middle part of my eye is what protrudes the most. So I'm going to put this sort of shape of a V, and it's curving slightly. And then as I go to this outer edge of my eye, I'm going to be doing curved lashes, and they're going to start to lay flat, like they're not standing straight up. Like, I don't want them to look like spokes. So what I don't want is this. I don't want it to do this, and then I don't want to do where my lashes are standing up. I want them to lay down sideways, so they're not verticals, they're laying flatter, and then they're sort of pulling up. And I'm going to start first just by establishing some larger ones. And your lashes are always in a state of growth and shedding. So I'm going to do the same thing on this side. In the middle, I'm going to do like a sort of like a V shape. And then I'm going to, as I go out, they're going to lay flatter. They're not standing up, but they're laying flatter down. And I'm just putting guiding ones on, but because we're always in a state of growing and shedding, there will be a mix of small and large lashes. As they come toward the center part of our eye, they start to get smaller, and they're not as thick, or they interfere with our tear duct. So as they come to the center part of our eye, they're laying flatter this way. So they're laying both times. They're going to start to lay down, and they're getting smaller and not as many. Now I'm going to add in some small ones and some larger ones, because we're always shedding and growing. So you're going to see some that are smaller and some that are larger as part of this. Same thing will occur on this side. And we don't want to make it look like it goes small, large, small, large. We want them to look natural, so occasionally there will be a couple small ones and then a couple large, but we're trying to make them look more natural, not as, like, I guess, not alternating, big, small, big, small. We don't want to end up with that. On the bottom, they do something similar. So I'm going to I start in the middle, and I'm going to curve like a V, upside down V there. So it's curving, curving, same thing in the middle. Curving, curving. I'm below the waterline. As it goes to the out, they're just sporadic little sprouts. Again, as it comes to the middle, they're going to get smaller, and they're not as planned. So out here, they're sort of laying flat and curving in the middle. They're getting smaller. Okay. Then I'm going to do, the next thing is I'm going to do my eyebrow. So I'm going to go up from the middle part of my eye, and I'm going to put a mark. So here's my guideline that's sort of at the top. We established this before. So I'm going to go up above. I want to, if I'm looking in a mirror, I want to look at the distance that I have between my lid line and the brow is following typically this edge. So it usually, I'm going to try to mark on the same side. So I'm going like up from the middle here where my crease is here. So I'm going up. I'm going to mark sort of the same height on this side. And then what normally happens, and you're going to want to look, because this is definitely, so your brow is designed to keep sweat out of your eyes, depending on where you lived, like your region of that you're from, is your family lineage sort of determines sometimes what this looks like as well. Sometimes it'll be tighter to your eye. For me, I have a pretty big gap here, but this is where the inner part of my eyebrow starts, and in the middle the hairs are going up. And I'm going to do this. So mine follows this. I'm going to do a light line to guide. Mine goes sort of flat here, then curves down and sort of follows. That's it, following this outer brow bone. So I'm going to sort of make a guideline here and here. Now, certainly you can have them groomed to look however you want them to look. But in the middle, the hair goes up, and as it goes out, it starts to lay flatter. For most people, it's thicker in the middle, and as it gets out to this outer edge, they start to lay down, and they are smaller. So in the middle, I'm just trying to mirror it. It's going up, and I'm using that guideline to just lay them on top of. And as it goes out, they're starting to lay flatter, and then laying down at the back. Okay, so I need to add a little more in here. When I look at it. But these are not like, you're not pulling up and down. You're trying to put them the direction that they actually go. Sometimes people have a unibrow, so mine actually turn a little bit in the middle. All right, so now this is flat. We have not done anything to really make this look three-dimensional yet, and we are going to do that. So we're going to make sure this is darker on this outer edge. All right, so now we've got our top part of our eye, our lid line, if you have one. We know this is our top lid, and then this is where like our eyebrow sits on our brow bone that sits beneath. We have our pupil, which is this black spot in the middle, and I interrupted mine with like a white reflected highlight. This is my iris, the color part of my eye. This is the sclera, spelled S-C-L-E-R-A, which is the white part of my eye, and this is my tear duct. This is our waterline and our lashes. Okay, and we're making sure that our lashes don't look like spokes. They look natural, and they're coming out from our face, then turning up a little bit. Now I'm going to erase any guidelines before I shade this. Okay, so I'm going to erase these extra guidelines out of here. And I don't care if they're completely out, but I want to erase most of them. Oops, I picked up a piece of graphite. Okay, now I'm going to start shading. So I need a piece of paper, like just a piece of scrap paper, and I'm going to scribble to puddle up some graphite. Okay, so I'm going to use this to then pick up graphite. I'm going to start in here. Now, our eye is a rounded surface, and it tucks into these corners. So in here, I'm going to shade on this inner part of my eye, darker as it tucks into the tear duct, and then let it fade as it's coming out. It's going to be darker in here as it goes into this corner of my eye. Will fade, and I'll leave it almost white there. It'll be darker here while my top lid is hanging over it. So I'm going to do that to this side in the corner where my tear duct is, darker, fading. So I'm just lightening the pressure. I'll pick up a little more graphite in the corner. It will be darker and then fading as it comes in. So here on the outer edge of our eye, it will be darker, and when I'm shading to the inside, I'm going to follow that like bursting pattern as it goes to the outer edge, and I'm getting rid of any white except for what's sitting right there where my reflection is. So on this side, it's darker on the outer edge, and I'm going to just pull my blending stub around there first, and then I'm going to shade, and I'm following that bursting pattern out. Okay, now the inner part of my eyes have some value. Now I'm going to shade here where we have this dent under our eye, and I'm just going lightly, and if you look in the mirror you will see that you have this. As we get older, sometimes it gets darker. We're going to leave this area light because it's usually sticking out and catching some light. Then we're going to do this inner part of our eye here is going to be darker as it's coming into, like this is the side of our nose here. So I'm going to shade right here, and I'm going to follow this side down here. I'm going to shade here. That's the side of our nose. Okay. And here you would have, this is like the, where your nose is caving in the furthest on your face. So it'd be deepest here, and then it would fade as it comes down. So like here would be this point right here called the, or I guess they call it the bridge of your nose, but it's this part of your face that's tucking in the deepest right here. And then for here, we're going to shade on our lid line. That area is creased in, so we're going to just shade right on top of our lid line. And then we're going to shade lightly in here, and as it comes out to the outer edge, it will fade and become lighter. Okay, so, and I'm putting this down on its side. Oop, I just picked up too much graphite right there. So darker on this inner side, and then fading as it comes out to this brow. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Darker on this inner side where it's tucked in there, and then fading as it comes out, and I'm laying this down on its side. I'm actually going to drag my finger to really smooth it in there. It's darkest in here. That's like this inner pit of your eye. Okay, and I'm going to shade the top of the lid just a little. I'm going to drag it. I don't want it to be left as light as the sclera is on my eye. And a lot of people also, I have this in the corner of my eye. I have like this area that sort of creases and dents in. It creases and dents in a little bit there. And that is essentially it. So we have like the sides of our nose here, and I'm angling this way to go here. We have this well below our eye. That's like this lower part of our socket system here. It's darker here. That's our eye sitting in that eye pit. And that is it. So we have our pupil, our iris. Some of you will have the burst, some of you will not. You have your lid line, your lashes, your waterline, your eyebrows. And we have the sclera and our tear duct. That is it. When you're done, photograph and submit.